Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling Peronism in Argentina.
Peronism.
We're not just looking at theory, though, right?
Right.
We're going deep into how Juan Perón actually tried to put those ideas into practice. Like, how do you govern based on Peronism? And we've got some amazing sources to help us do that. We have Perón's own Doctrina Peronista from 1947, a speech he gave to government officials in 52.
Wow.
And we're even going to look at some pieces of the Argentine Constitution.
That's fascinating.
It's a real journey to the heart of a movement that still shapes Argentina today.
Absolutely. And, it's one thing to have political ideas.
Yeah.
It's a whole other challenge to actually make those ideas work in the real world.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to look at.
Yeah, how did Perón bridge that gap, right? From
That's
these grand ideas to how do you actually run a country?
Yeah, how do you make social justice or economic fairness actually happen, like, on the ground?
Exactly.
In the nitty-gritty of government.
Now, Perón himself famously described Peronism as a third way.
Right.
What do you think he meant by that, and how did that shape his approach to governing?
So Perón, he was looking at Argentina, and he saw it kind of trapped between these two extremes, like communism on one side, and then this really hands-off, laissez-faire capitalism on the other. And he thought both of them were failing the people, right?
Yeah.
They weren't really addressing the real needs.
Interesting.
And so he wanted to create this middle path, something that took the best of both worlds, combined the social responsibility with some economic freedom.
A hybrid.
Exactly, a hybrid, a third way. And that's key to understanding him, like from his economic policies to how he thought about running the government itself.
So let's dive into a specific source here.
Okay.
Perón's own Doctrina Peronista from 1947.
Right.
This is considered like a foundational text of Peronism.
Absolutely.
What are some of the key things that we can pull out of this document?
So Doctrina Peronista, it lays out Peronism's core.
Okay.
And it's like a three-pronged philosophy, philosophical, political, and social. And a big argument he makes is that Argentina, by this point, is really fractured by all this political infighting.
Yeah.
And he sees Peronism as this, like, unifying force.
Right.
It's about moving beyond these old partisan divides.
Okay.
And creating a shared sense of national purpose,
Interesting.
Like, we are all Argentines.
Together.
Exactly. And this idea of unity, it's like a thread that runs through all of his speeches and writings.
So it's fascinating how he frames this, right? It's like Peronism is the solution to this specific problem, this feeling of division within the country.
Exactly.
But how did he see that unity actually translating into governance?
Right.
Like, did he give any concrete ideas about, okay, if we're all unified, how do we actually run things?
That's a great question. And, interestingly, Doctrina Peronista, it's really focused on, like, the big picture, the ideology. It's a little less detailed on the nuts and bolts of governing.
I see.
But we start to get glimpses of that in his later speeches, particularly this one from 1952, where he's talking directly to government officials.
Ah, yes. The 1952 speech.
Yeah.
And he kind of paints a bleak picture there of what the Argentine government was like when he first came to power in 46.
Oh, yeah.
He basically describes it as total chaos.
Right.
Like no planning, no organization.
It's a mess.
It sounds like he had a pretty big challenge on his hands right from the start.
Absolutely. Like, he comes in and he's faced with this dilemma.
Yeah.
Okay, do I plan meticulously for every possible scenario?
Right.
Or do I just jump in and start doing things and kind of figure it out as I go?
Adapt on the fly.
Exactly. And ultimately, he chose action over perfection.
He's like, let's just get things moving.
Yeah, we got to get things done. And so that meant constantly adapting, creating solutions as new problems popped up.
Right.
But by 52, he's giving this speech, and you can tell there's a functioning structure in place.
Okay, so he's made some progress.
Yeah, he's really proud of that. But now his focus shifts to the people, to the human element.
Okay.
Because he's realized you can have the best systems in the world,
right?
But if you don't have the right people running them, it's all for nothing.
And he's talking specifically here about government officials, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. He compares them to teachers and fathers.
Wow.
It's not enough for them to just be competent. They need to be instilling this moral administrative conduct.
Okay, so he's like setting a really high bar here.
He is.
But this is where things get really interesting, I think.
Okay.
Because Perón had some very strong opinions about bureaucracy.
Oh, he did.
Didn't he?
He really did. In that 1952 speech, he just rails against bureaucracy.
Like, what did he say?
He called it a disease. that saps the intelligence and efficiency out of everything.
So he saw it as more than just like an inefficiency.
Yeah, it was deeper than that.
Okay.
And he had this really vivid way of describing it.
What was it?
He talked about the endless cycle of paperwork.
Yeah.
And he used the phrase, give it trimite, which means like, just process it.
Just shuffle the papers.
Yeah, just shuffle the papers from desk to desk.
Nothing gets done.
Exactly. No real progress.
It sounds like he really thought bureaucracy was like an existential threat.
He did?
To his vision of a dynamic and responsive state.
I think you're right.
Like, it's almost as if he feared it would, like, undermine the very spirit of Peronism.
Yeah, that drive for national unity and progress.
So how did he propose to fix this, like, this bureaucratic disease?
So his solution was interesting.
Okay.
He thought the answer was a smaller, more highly paid, and crucially more responsible workforce.
So he wanted to shrink the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But invest in, like, a more elite group of civil servants.
Exactly. And he argued that by doing that, you'd get greater efficiency.
Yeah.
And more importantly, more accountability.
Okay, that makes sense.
He even went as far as comparing government officials to teachers and fathers. Like they should be shaping the character of the nation.
Not just, pushing paper.
Exactly.
So he's trying to instill, like, a sense of moral responsibility.
He is.
Not just technical competence. But, before we go too deep into Peron's, like, administrative vision,
right,
I think we need to bring in another element here.
What's that?
The legal framework of Argentina.
Okay.
Those excerpts from the Argentine Constitution.
Good point. We can't forget about the legal context.
Yeah, we have to look at how Peronism fits into that existing structure.
Absolutely. And the Constitution, it reveals some interesting tensions.
Okay.
Particularly around the balance of power between the federal government and the provinces.
Yeah, that classic tension between centralized power and regional autonomy.
It's a big one.
Definitely something we need to unpack further.
Absolutely.
And, I'm also curious about how the Constitution deals with individual rights.
Yeah.
In this context.
You could.
Are those rights seen as, like, absolute, or are they subject to the needs of the state?
These are key questions.
Yeah.
And the answers, they're not always straightforward.
Okay.
The Argentine Constitution lays out some guarantees.
Okay.
But it also leaves a lot of room for interpretation and regulation by the government.
So it's going to be fascinating to see.
It is.
How all of this played out.
Yeah, how those constitutional complexities actually worked in practice under Perón.
Under Perón's leadership.
Exactly.
All right, well, stay tuned for more on that.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get into some of these constitutional complexities.
Okay.
What parts of the Argentine Constitution really stand out to you?
Well, right away, you see this tension, right?
Okay.
Between the power of the federal government and how much autonomy the provinces have.
Okay, so like a power struggle.
Kinda. Yeah, Article 75 gives a ton of power to the National Congress.
Okay.
But then you've got Article 126, and that one focuses on what provinces can't do.
Instead of what they can do.
So it's like they're trying to hold on to power,
right,
but also recognizing that regions need to be able to make their own decisions.
Exactly. It's this balancing act.
I bet that created some headaches for Perón.
Oh, for sure.
As he was trying to put his vision into practice.
Yeah, trying to get everyone on board.
Now, what about individual rights?
Right.
How does the Constitution handle those?
Well, Article 14 guarantees all the essentials.
Okay. Like what?
Like the right to work, free speech, property.
Yeah.
All that.
Okay. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah. But there's a catch.
Oh, there's always a catch.
It uses this phrase, conform a las lies.
What does that mean?
Basically, in accordance with the laws.
Ah, so it's not that simple.
No.
It means these rights aren't absolute.
Right.
They can be regulated by the state.
Exactly.
So the government has a lot of power to define the limits of those rights.
They do. And this is where Perón's economic vision gets really interesting.
Okay, how so?
Because he was convinced that the state had to step in.
To make sure things were fair to guarantee social justice.
And he says this outright in Doctrina Peronista, right?
He does. He argues that economic fairness isn't just about welfare programs.
Right.
It's about changing the whole system.
Restructuring the economy.
Exactly, a total overhaul.
It's pretty radical.
It was a huge departure from that hands-off capitalism.
Right, the laissez-faire approach.
Yeah, he saw the state as the engine of progress.
Driving both social and economic change. And this idea of land redistribution is a perfect example.
Oh yeah, he famously said the land should belong to those who work it.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It was a direct challenge to the traditional landowners.
Yeah, shaking things up.
For sure.
And don't forget about his push for a mobile and vital minimum wage.
Right, one that kept pace with the cost of living.
Trying to make sure everyone had at least a basic level of economic security.
Exactly.
So again, we see that rejection of both extremes.
Mm.
He didn't like communist collectivism.
Nope.
But he also wasn't a fan of totally unrestrained capitalism.
Not at all. He wanted that third way, remember?
Right, that middle path.
Finding a balance between individual initiative
Yeah.
and a strong state that could ensure fairness and opportunity.
And it seems like data was really important to him, too.
He believed in using information and expertise to make smart decisions.
So it wasn't all just ideology.
Nope. He wanted solid evidence to back up his policies.
And you mentioned earlier this Administration and Statistics Department.
Right.
What was their role?
So their job was to gather and analyze data on everything.
Right.
Demographics, economic activity, social trends, all of it.
He wanted a complete picture of what was happening in Argentina.
He thought it was crucial for managing the nation effectively.
And allocating resources wisely.
Right, making sure things were going where they were most needed.
Tailoring policies to people's actual needs.
Exactly.
It's kind of like he was anticipating the whole data-driven governance thing.
Yeah, using big data to inform policy decisions.
It's amazing to think about.
It really is.
But of course, it raises a lot of questions, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, what does it mean for privacy?
Right.
How do you make sure the data is being used ethically?
Big questions.
Definitely.
But for Perón, this was a big change from how things were done before.
A real push for modernization.
Absolutely. He wanted a government that was responsive to the people.
And I guess having that data could help him identify inequalities and create a more unified society.
That's a great point.
So data wasn't just about efficiency for him.
Right.
It was a tool for social justice.
Exactly. A way to build a better Argentina.
It's amazing how all these different pieces of Perón's thinking come back to this idea of national unity.
It's like the foundation.
Yeah, whether it's his economic vision or how he thought about the role of government, it all connects to this idea of building a system that works for all Argentines.
Not just the privileged few.
Exactly. He was really trying to find that balance.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Right between individual freedom and collective responsibility. Economic growth and social justice. It's something every country struggles with.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what makes Perón so fascinating.
Yeah.
He was really trying to navigate that middle ground.
Trying to find that third way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from Perón's core philosophy to his ideas about how you actually structure a government.
And nitty-gritty.
Yeah. But I think the big takeaway for me is that Perón wasn't just a theorist.
Right.
He was a doer.
A man of action.
He took those ideas and tried to put them into practice.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty.
He used everything he could.
Yeah, the state apparatus.
The legal system.
Even statistics.
To try and create the kind of Argentina he envisioned.
And he wasn't afraid to shake things up.
No, he wasn't.
Whether it was land redistribution or pushing for a more data-driven government.
That third way.
He was always pushing boundaries, challenging the status quo.
And always with this goal
of
creating a more just and equal society.
That was his driving force.
He definitely left his mark on Argentina.
No doubt about it.
And his ideas are still relevant today.
Absolutely, both in Argentina and around the world.
It makes you wonder, though.
What's that?
How do Argentines view Perón today?
That's a complicated question.
I bet it is.
It's a really mixed bag.
Look, what do you mean?
Well, some people see him as a hero.
Okay.
The champion of the working class who brought about real progress. But others criticize him for his authoritarian tendencies.
Okay.
And some argue that his policies actually created problems down the line.
So a controversial figure.
He is, but that's often the case with leaders who try to make big changes.
Right. It's a reminder that history is rarely simple.
Yeah, it's full of nuance.
Leaders are complex people.
They are.
And their legacies are often multifaceted.
Exactly. Shaped by all sorts of factors.
The context they were working in.
The choices they made.
The challenges they faced.
And how people interpret those things later on.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
I hope so.
We've explored the heart of Peronism.
Yeah, from those big ideas.
To the very specific ways Perón tried to put them into action.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. And if you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to check out some of the resources we'll be linking in the show notes.
There's so much more to explore.
Whether it's Peronism itself.
Right.
Argentine history.
Or even just those big questions about social justice and the role of the state.
The deep dive never really ends.
The best ones just lead to more questions.
More exploration.
And a deeper understanding of the world.
So keep those minds churning.
And we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
CN.